Lecture 4, Crafting the Oral Presentation. Please ask questions if you have them. Congratulations, you have written a paper which was well received and sent off an abstract which was accepted. But now you need to write the script for the oral presentation. This can be challenging because you must condense a much longer paper into 15 minutes. As noted, listening to a paper is very different from reading a paper. However, learning to present your work is an important academic exercise which invites critical engagement with your work, which in turn enables you to improve your writing and thinking skills. Because many presentations include visual elements, e.g. PowerPoint, this lecture offers guidelines for converting a written paper into an oral presentation and creating a visual material that is appropriate for that presentation. There are more extensive guides for this process which can be found elsewhere on the internet and in other sources. Use them. And there are different conventions for oral papers in different fields, so you should consult those with knowledge and expertise to assist you when you compose your first oral presentation. Task. Close your eyes and imagine you were listening to this passage during a conference. As you listen, what do you think is wrong with it? Ready Player One thus dialectically forecloses on what Dinshaw describes as the queer potentialities of amateur reading by reducing reading to a purely ludic game of memorization and textual association, as if seduced by the consumerist version of Barthes' plaisir de texte. Thus it rejects the inherently deconstructive and transgressive ways that amateurs play with ideologically authorized texts and traditions, and thereby produces alternative readings that trouble the careful binaries to which the oppressive illusion of heteronormativity is maintained. The novel phantasmagorically reproduces as real in the Lacanian sense and heteronormative the ideologies that Kuttlich, following Jameson's late Marxist praxis, accuses of interpenetrating their fans into exploitative late capitalist means of production. Now take a moment and write down some problems with this passage. Believe me, I've heard worse. This passage would be hard to understand even if you were reading it, much less hearing it spoken. Note the complex sentences, the deft references to theory and theorists, the lit-crit jargon, the name-dropping. Now think of other common faults we see in an oral presentation. PPT slide text is too small, or on a background of the wrong color. Sometimes image quality is poor. Presenters use cool but very distracting special effects for text and images. Some presenters do not speak clearly or rush to their talk. Some have a PowerPoint presentation that seems unconnected to their talk and is full of spelling errors. When you are preparing your draft, keep in mind that your audience will rely on listening comprehension, not reading comprehension. That means that your ideas and language need to be clear and to the point, organized in a way that makes it possible for your audience to follow you. Keep focused on what is absolutely essential for your audience to understand. All the rest, so to speak, is just icing on the cake. Length. Over the years, I have found that I need to write about 2,100 words for a 15-minute presentation. I think this is a pretty good guesstimate, but your own practice should be the guide. As in a written paper, remember to do the following early on. Number 1, introduce yourself. Number 2, state your thesis clearly. Number 3, explain why this issue is important. Number 4, explain what your contribution is. Number 5, give an outline of your subsequent methodology and conclusions. Key concept, clarity and effectiveness. The lessons you learned in previous modules about writing clearly and effectively also apply to oral presentations. Here are some points to remember. A, each paragraph should have a clear point. B, paragraphs should logically follow one another. C, pay attention to transitions as you move from one topic to another. You may see the connection, but do not assume that your audience will. Context is important. Avoid wordy expressions such as undertake to examine instead of simply examine. Avoid cliches like the plague. If you are unsure about some aspect of English pronunciation, grammar, and usage, consult a dictionary or other sources. Quotes. While your written article may have many quotes, there is no time for that in oral paper. When a quotation is necessary, use a signal phrase to introduce the source to your audience. For example, you can say, as theorist Sandra somebody states, or Theorist Sandra, somebody has argued that. Also, your handout can provide the text of longer quotes if needed. When needed, you can put charts, tables, graphs, and even images in the handout. Your conclusion is important. Your audience has just listened to many of your arguments, but they may have already forgotten some of them. Make sure to remind them how you came to your conclusion and why your scholarly project and analysis matter. For example, you can start your conclusion by stating, as my presentation has shown, SS's relationship to HHH is contingent on the factors A, B, C. In conclusion, I would like to argue that. Here you summarize your main points and give your conclusion. And be sure to thank the audience for listening to you. Incorporating slides and visual material. Depending on your field of study or the nature of the conference, you may need to show some visual material. You may even need to show movie clips and sound clips. Whether it's a pie chart to show percentages or a powerful photograph to convey a point, visuals can be much more effective than words. Most presenters write the oral text and then create the slideshow. But a better method is to create both at the same time, always asking yourself which is the more effective way of transmitting a given point, through word or through images. A proper graphic can both save time and help the audience to better understand the topic. Now remember, keep your visuals clean and simple. A successful visual presentation should be in sync with the spoken part of your presentation. You can coordinate your talking and reading points with your visual presentation by marking your paragraph whenever you move to a new slide. Make sure that you address the visual material that your audience is viewing on the screen. Don't assume that the audience will get it. Many people may still be thinking about your previous point and need your direction to understand the relevance of the visuals you are showing them. Pointing out what your listeners are looking at allows them to follow your argument and perhaps even better understand it. But be selective when you choose your images, visuals, and graphics. Ask yourself, does this visual demonstrate my point? How does it relate to my point? Avoid mere eye candy, that is, fancy pictures that have no informational value. Likewise, do not use complex and unneeded transitions between slides. Because your audience is listening to you and also reading, try to keep the written part of a slide short. Reading all your points from the slides could be a tedious thing for your audience, so short summaries, approximately 2 to 5 words, may work best on a slide. Too much text overwhelms your listeners. If your slide includes text, make sure the font size is large enough and that the color of the font works well with the slide's background. Legibility is the key. Make sure you can be seen from the back of the room. As you move through your lecture, give your audience enough time to look at each slide. Don't seem rushed. You may have looked at your slides many times, but your audience needs time to absorb them and understand why each slide is relevant. Standardize the appearance of your slides. Use the same font, colors, placement of graphics and text, and so on. Spell check. It is very easy to overlook typos when you integrate visuals, but the audience members will see them. Be sure to proofread. Use high-quality images. Sometimes it's easier to find images online to use for presentations. However, the quality of online images varies dramatically, and sometimes you may need to scan images in order to retain a professional look for your slides. It is therefore important to begin preparing your presentation well in advance and avoid last-minute additions of low-resolution images. If you are using movie clips, realize you must subtract their running time from your speaking time, or you will exceed your allotted time. Practice makes perfect. Practice your talk even before your final draft. The exercise of reading the paper out loud will help you find mistakes in your draft, such as misspellings and unfinished sentences and missing words, and it will help you judge the general flow and coherence of your paper. And if possible, have another person listen to. Summary. 1. Compose the oral paper as something to be heard and understood immediately, not as something that can be read and reread. 2. Language and syntax should be simpler, and the flow of argument should be clear. 3. Visuals can sometimes transmit information better than language, but make sure the visuals are effectively produced and work well in conjunction with the spoken text. 4. Practice. Now on to my lecture, which is advice about the mechanics of attending a conference, giving the paper, and then taking questions. onward to the end.